Nice shiny mirror finish. Alright, now that the xDSD Gryphon is out of the box, we get to take a closer look, and this is the top view of the Gryphon. As I mentioned before, you have a nice OLED display here. It uses iFi's CyberSync operating system. All the information from format to battery life is there on this screen. And iFi thought of everything because iFi uses its silent line technology so that the display does not add any noise into the system. You also have the option to turn off the display if you like. So this is the bottom of the Gryphon, and here you can see the IE match switch. And the function of IE match is it reduces annoying hiss from high sensitivity headphones without losing any dynamic range. And it also helps a lot with IEMs with high sensitivity so that you don't hear that hiss while you're listening to them on the xDSD Gryphon. And you have 3 settings. You can set it to be active with a 3.5mm headphone jack, 4.4 Pentacon headphone jack, or you can set it to off. You also have these 4 rubber feet that are going to protect your Gryphon from any scratches. All right, now you're looking at the front of the xDSD Gryphon, and starting on the left side, you have some connections there. And on the right hand, you have some buttons that will describe what their function is for. So starting with the left, you have a 3.5mm connection for headphones. And it does have the S-Balance feature that's gonna max out single-ended headphones. And directly to the right of that, you have the 4.4mm balanced Pentacon connection. That's gonna give you your balance sound for your balanced headphones. Then right below here, it's a little bit harder to see, but you have your kilohertz LED as well as your input LED. And that's gonna change color depending on the quality of the audio as well as which input is currently selected. And right in the middle, you have a nice volume dial that feels very good and actually clicks in place as you turn the dial, as you can see here. If you slowly turn it, it kind of clicks into the next setting on the volume dial. So very nicely done with that volume dial. And you also have the indicator here to let you know where on the dial your current volume is set to. To the right of the volume dial, you have the X Space feature. Now X Space adds soundstage to recordings, and that's the LED for that. It will change based on the current setting of X Space. Right below that, you have the X Space Plus, also known as X Space 2, which adds bass to compensate for things such as open back headphones or recordings that can use more bass. And you can select between bass and or presence so that the upper mid-range frequencies are correctly added back into the recording. So very cool, and it seems like they thought of everything. So actually going back to the volume control, it's actually a multi-function knob. So you can control different things, and now it's not only used to power the device on and off, but you can mute and unmute your sound. And you can also use it to set some of the settings that I'll talk about later. All right, and this larger button right here is the settings button. And what the settings button will do, it'll allow you to turn on X Bass, X Bass, or both, and that's done through short pressing this button. Now if you long press a button, it takes you to the menu settings, and with the menu settings you can control a few things. So in the menu settings, you can actually control the way one of the USB-C ports functions in the back. You can either have it set for charging or set for signal input only. You can also turn on and off Bluetooth voice prompt. You can also set the brightness to either high, low, or set it to off completely. And finally, one of the most important menu features that you can control here is the digital filter. And there are 3 digital filter options to choose from. You can either choose Bit Perfect, which is no digital filtering. You can use the GTO filter, which is upsampled to 384/352 kilohertz with a minimum filtering with no pre-ringing and minimum post ringing. Finally, you have the STD filter, which does modest filtering, modest pre and post ringing. I personally enjoy the GTO filter the best. I've tried that out with their other devices, and that just sounds the best for my personal preference. All right, now let's take a look at the back of the xDSD Gryphon. Starting from the left, you have one selected switch, and the rest are ports. So the switch on the left here is used in conjunction with the X Bass 2 feature, and it allows you to choose between bass, presence, or bass plus presence. Next, you have a USB-C port that's dedicated to charging the xDSD Gryphon. And the cool thing about it is that you can charge the xDSD Gryphon while you're using it. Next, you have the USB-C Super Speed port, and this is the port I talked about earlier that you can set to either allow charging or to only allow data. The next port here is a SPDIF 3.5mm coaxial/optical input. Then you have a 4.4mm Pentacon balance input, as well as a single-ended 3.5mm input. So along with the USB input, you have plenty of input options to feed into your xDSD Gryphon. And finally, on the right, you have the button for Bluetooth pairing and input selector. This is a very important button. It allows you to switch between USB, Bluetooth, and line inputs. So with the line input, you can either use the 4.4mm or the 3.5mm connector. When you enter Bluetooth mode, there will be a Bluetooth icon on the display on top of this unit. And if you previously had a device stored, it will automatically connect to it. Otherwise, it will enter pairing mode. If you already have devices saved, and you can save up to 8 devices. Now, if you need to enter Bluetooth pairing, go ahead and press the Bluetooth pairing button here for about 1 second, and it will enter Bluetooth pairing mode. Now let's take a look at the beautiful display. All right, so you can kind of see the display here, and it does tell you what the current input is, as well as the battery life and the current volume. Let's take a look at the front of the unit because I want to show you something really quick. First of all, you'll notice that there's a nice LED right here. And it's actually going to shine through the volume indicator that you'll see in just a bit. And here in the front, you see that input LED illuminated, and it's illuminated magenta, which corresponds to USB. Blue is Bluetooth, green is SPDIF, and yellow is line input. And you'll notice that on the volume knob, you have a blue LED, but the cool thing that as you increase the volume, this LED will light up differently. So once we go to about medium setting, it'll go yellow, and then you can keep spinning it. And eventually, once you get to turbo mode, it'll turn red, as we'll see in just a bit. So let's go ahead and give it a try. See, it's turning color, and it's now green. And green corresponds to about 78 of volume. If we keep going, we finally hit red. And red is turbo mode, as we see here. So when turbo mode kicks in, you can add up to 6 dB of gain. And now I'm going to go ahead and turn on some of these features so you can see them turned on in the LED there. You see that now I have X bass and X space turned on. I'm going to go ahead and change the input, and let's go with Bluetooth. So you see Bluetooth indicator there, and it's going to go ahead and start blinking, letting you know it's in pairing mode. Or I can go ahead and change to SPDIF, line, USB, and so on. So I'm gonna put it back on USB. So it's a really cool display that gives you all sorts of information. So I do wanna show you all the settings available on the xDSD Gryphon. So I'm gonna go ahead and long press this button here, and we'll see in a display what settings are available. And here we go. You can control the digital filter, screen brightness. You can set a volume limiter, volume sync, volume soft ramp, Bluetooth voice prompt, USB dual port charge, and you can factory reset your device. Now I do wanna mention that when you do get your iFi xDSD Gryphon, you visit iFi's website and you download their latest firmware and drivers, because I found it makes a world of difference if you install their current drivers as well as their current firmware. They could always add new features, so make sure you do that before using your device. Otherwise, you may experience some problems that could have been resolved with those updates. Now that we took care of going over the basics of the Gryphon, we're going to talk about the features of the xDSD Gryphon and what makes this device special. So for the digital stage, it uses the Burr Brown multi-bit chip and the pure wave analog power section, pumping out up to 1 watt of power. With a max of 6.7 volts output, it should be able to handle most headphones out there. The 4.4mm balance is best. So one cool feature that was interesting to read about was its CyberSync feature, which is a software-driven volume control that operates in the analog domain, and it synchronizes with any digital source to which the xDSD Gryphon is connected to. So it provides volume synchronization between the source and the DAC. It detects which operating system the DAC is connected to, whether it be iOS, Android, Windows, or Mac, and even Linux, and instructs the source's OS to bypass its software volume control. So whether the volume is adjusted using the xDSD Gryphon's rotary control or on the source device, CyberSync ensures that the changes are performed purely by the Gryphon's analog control chip, while also displaying the adjustment on the source device's screen. So that's really cool. So the weight of the Gryphon is 215 grams or 0.5 pounds. The battery life lasts about 8 hours. All right, as far as sound goes, the xDSD Gryphon is not going to sound as good as your desktop DAC and amp, but it will get pretty close and is much more portable, so you can take it with you wherever you go. And it's, I think, the #1 reason most people are gonna end up buying this DAC amp. So you're probably wondering, how much power can the Gryphon actually produce? And so let me talk a little bit about that with my Beyerdynamic DT1990 Pros. These are 250 ohm headphones with a sound pressure level 102 dB. So when using these headphones with the Gryphon, I had it set to a volume level of 94 out of 106 possible. So it doesn't leave you much headroom for harder to drive headphones such as the DT1990. So just keep that in mind when you purchase this DAC amp. Now I think you're much better off pairing the xDSD Gryphon with headphones such as these. These are the Sivka Robins, also known as the SV021s, and these come in at 32 ohms of impedance, so they're much better for taking them on the go as well because they're more portable, slimmer profile than the DT1990s, for example. And because they're low impedance, that means they're gonna be easier to drive from your DAC amp. Pairing these headphones with the xDSD, I had the volume set to 80, which left me plenty of headroom in case I wanted to increase the volume more. Now, if you use a Gryphon without any of its special EQ features turned on, it sounds very close to neutral in sound signature. The treble sounds nice without sounding too sharp, but the treble also seems to roll off a bit at the very top. The bass sounds very good without being overbearing. The mids fill in the mid-range nicely, and the sound is a bit on the warmer side. Overall, for a portable DAC amp, it's pretty impressive for listening to your music on the go. I also found that it worked very well for gaming, and I was able to hear enemy footsteps and gunfire with a clear direction of where they were coming from. Those wanting the ability to EQ their sound will have some nice presets to play with to modify the bass, upper mid-range, and soundstage to their liking. Listening wirelessly through Bluetooth using my iPhone, the sound was pretty good, especially songs that were in high-res lossless, but overall sounded a bit compressed when compared to listening over USB. So now let's talk about how the xDSD sounded with the different digital filters available on this device. First of all, BitPerfect sounds good. It's like a flatter sound, closer to neutral. When I turn the STD filter on, some of the highs come alive. The bass impact is improved. The overall flow of the music seems slowed down for some reason. It's more of a relaxed listening experience than with BitPerfect. I do like how the STD filter sounds better than BitPerfect, but the overall sound is just a bit too relaxed for my taste. With the GTO filter, bass is more pronounced. There's a slight bump in the mid treble. The treble and high mid seem a little rolled off. It almost feels like there's a light veil over the music. The impact produced by the mids and bass is not quite there in the way I like it. I feel like the GTO filter on this device is just not for me. If I had to rate them in order, I would rate the GTO filter at the lowest, then the STD filter, because I liked how it sounded. I just didn't like the relaxed feel of it. And in the end, I stuck with listening to my music using BitPerfect because it just sounded the best to my ears. Now let's talk about the built-in EQ settings and how they sounded with the music. With the XBass 2 feature, with the setting in the back set to bass, the bass is more pronounced and it takes a lot longer to roll off. Bass guitars are more prominent and kind of take over the sound. I think the XBass 2 feature is perfect if you're going to be listening to hip-hop music. For all other genres, unless your headphones need a boost in the bass, the XBass 2 feature just overpowered the sound and I prefer it off. Now with the XBass setting turned on and with the switch in the back set to presence, it does a good job filling in the upper mid-range, but it does change up the sound a bit. I can see how some people might like this setting. I found that it made the sound a bit fatiguing, so I decided not to use this feature. Finally, the XBass setting with the back switch set to bass plus presence. I think that if you're going to turn on XBass, this is the setting to go with. It just sounded the most natural. I think iFi might have something going for them with this setting. Okay, so now let's talk about XBass. One thing I noticed with the xDSD Gryphon is that the soundstage is pretty near to your ears. So this XBass setting might help to make the sound a bit wider, and I think it did a good job with doing so without any degradation in the sound. Now, if you're one of those that wants more bass and more soundstage, then knock yourself out because you can actually turn on both XBass and the XBass setting, which actually sounded pretty good. In the end though, I ended up sticking with listening with BitPerfect and the XBass and XBass settings turned off. So overall, the iFi xDSD Gryphon is a very good portable DAC amp, especially when paired with portable low impedance headphones. It's got some nice high-end features like Bluetooth, IE match, XBass and XBass EQ presets, as well as a nice OLED display that some people might find very useful. Alright, that does it for this video. See you in the next one.